Hi, I'm Sara Morsey. Welcome to Voices of Calm. Today I'm reading a delightful essay written by Daly called Nonsense and Sense, a tribute to Gertrude Stein. Nonsense is sense. Sense depends on placement, entirely on placement. Place nonsense wherever and it becomes sense, or at least Kansas City. Sense is boring, or rather it can be boring, if one is searching for boredom, which one would definitely be doing in Kansas City. In Paris, boredom is not possible. True boredom must be sought, but the seeker in Paris finds everything else. Sense and boredom are sisters, very fat sisters. That they are so linked is satisfying, but tragic. Tragedy does not occur in Kansas City, in Medicine Hat and Moose Jaw. All occurrences have magnitude. I met a man in Walla Walla, Washington, who had two hats. He was sad. He said, "Why should one have two hats when one has only one head?" He was lost. He knew not whether he should get another head or throw one hat away. Such tragedy is palpable and therefore usually ignored, especially by people in Kansas City. To be bored is senseless, but sense is needed to define boredom. Sensible people do not get bored because they are insensitive. They do not appreciate nonsense. Unless it is part of an undergraduate course in literature, then it is discussed. Then people look for the rules, the whys and the wherefores, the how-abouts, and even the Williamsons. Sensible people do not understand nonsense or the need for it. It is nonsense to live a sensible life. That is why sensible people have no grasp of the tragedy that is. That is their life. And their lives. Because they can spell and wash, they think perfection is within their reach. They think that because they know that knowing is theirs. But it isn't. To know the difference is the difference. Sense and nonsense are different because they are different. But because they are different, they are the same, just different. Sensible people think that Tuesday is different. Perhaps they get their hair cut that day, or something. That is something else, not something different. But Tuesday is Tuesday. It will always be Tuesday. When it is Tuesday, Tuesday cannot be different, even in Kansas City. Those who want to know, ask. Sometimes. That is why it is difficult to see the nonsense. Nonsense is here to stay, but we are going. Or when we stay, nonsense leaves. Perhaps it takes a bus, or a train, or even a plane, just as we do when we leave. We have choices. But it is foolish to say we could have taken the train when we are in the bus, because it would be impossible, because we are in the bus. People talk of making sense, or of making sense of things. This is sad because things are things. Being what they are, they have no need of sense, or nonsense, or Tuesday, or Kansas City, or pork pies made in Ealing. But when we are in the bus, we do not try to make sense of the bus, or nonsense for that matter. Because the bus goes, we need say no more about it. But when the bus doesn't go and we want it to go, we get angry. Anger is nonsense. It will not make the bus go, any more than nonsense will make the bus go. That is why it is nonsense. Why everything, including the bus, is nonsense. But it takes sense to see the nonsense of it. Making and seeing are tiring. What is even more tiring is to hear other people talk of making and seeing and shooting, and drinking cups of hot coffee on the left bank of the Elwood Canal. Cold coffee is a sin. Not even sensible people should like it. Elwood is in Melbourne. Melbourne is in Australia. Melbourne is like Kansas City, except it is not in the least like Kansas City, but the people of Melbourne are like those of Kansas City, except that nobody writes songs about Melbourne. Not that anyone would listen if someone did. The difference between Melbourne and Kansas City is not like the difference between Kansas City and Melbourne. In Melbourne, they play football and bridges fall down. In Kansas City, these things do not happen, at least not to the same degree. I never met a man from Melbourne. That is because I had already met one from Kansas City and didn't want to go all that way. For nothing. For nothing more than nothing. A trip like that wouldn't make sense. Or at least I would not be able to make sense of it. A woman once asked me why I wrote. No, she asked me twice. I asked her why she asked. She said that she wanted to know. I asked her why she wanted to know. She got upset. I asked her why she was upset. She refused to answer. I'm so sorry, and I'm not starting over. I'm in my own home. She refused to answer. I said that I wasn't worried. She could ask again, later, even on a Tuesday. She asked why on a Tuesday. I asked why not on a Tuesday. She never spoke to me again. This was tragic. Or it would have been tragic if the woman hadn't lived in Kansas City. The man with two hats and the woman are different. This is not to say that they were the same, because they were not. That I spoke of both should not suggest togetherness. My speech and togetherness are different. My speech holds nothing. Therefore, it has the value of nonsense. And therefore, it has sense. Togetherness always holds nothing, but holds it together. So argument is unlikely. Understanding does not make or unmake sense. If you understand, you may say that you understand, or you may not. If you do not understand, you may also say that you understand, but you would not understand. Therefore, it would be nonsense to say that you understood. That is what we are talking about. Nonsense and its relationship to sense. So whether you understand may be of interest, but of little use, even in Kansas City. Taking things away does not make sense, nor does it make nonsense. To leave things does not make sense either. There are those who say that to leave things is to accept them, and there are those who say that to take things away is to accept them. Truth is not a factor here. The saying is the fault of the matter. Those who say, say, and those who don't say. But the not saying does not affect the sense of what is not said. But the not saying does not affect the sense of what is not said, or of what is said. The silent cannot make nonsense. Therefore, what is said must relate to sense. Nonsense that does not claim sense, but sense claims nonsense. Nonsense does not claim sense, but sense claims nonsense. Sense is aimed at those who wish to be convinced by those who wish to convince, even when it is not convenient. Therefore, sense can be a tool in the hands of the sensible, the people with 6 small dogs, the canal dwellers of Melbourne and the pastry cooks of Montmartre. Sense can change things. Often change is not needed, but happens anyway. The way of anyway is the way it will happen if it happens. To say that there is a way when there is any way is nonsense. To make sense of such a thought is nonsense and can be dangerous. Explaining things can be a sensible way, but this does not mean that it makes sense. To explain, one says, and to say, one explains. To say and to explain are not the same. They are both verbs, but they are not the same. A pig is a noun, but this does not mean that pigs and nouns are the same, nor does it mean that pigs do not make sense, or that they do not make nonsense. To explain often is to compare, and to compare often is to compare. To compare involves both explanation and comparison, as well as things. Explanation does not always help sense. Explanation can prevail where sense does not. Sense is not the key to understanding, but explanation can be the door. The other side of where one was before. To suggest that one can advance by going through the door is not helpful. One is where one is. To say that one was somewhere else and has moved is to state the matter. But the sense of the moving is not attached to the moving or to the position or to the door or to the people of Kansas City. Comparisons are like, both in the city and the country. Separation does not affect the effect of a comparison. To object is to raise a thing from the level of sense to the level of higher sense, or to the level of nonsense. Comparison is easy because one does not have to do anything. Objecting is harder because sense may be involved. Sensible people do not compare much, but object a lot. That is why they are such pains and are best avoided. At the end, and there is an end, one is at the end. Sense and nonsense do not need an ending, although they may need a beginning. But need is comparative and therefore does not rely on sense alone. However, comparison is not always needed or needful. One should know that things that are needful are not always needed. If one does not know this, one is like the people in Kansas City. That is, if one is not already in Kansas City. Endings can be nice, but not always desirable. A house can have an ending, but is rarely totally desirable. People can carry an ending with them, or just the memory of an ending, and not feel ridiculous. On the other hand, how can one carry a house everywhere? Unless one is a snail or some other invertebrate, one would not like to be burdened with a house. This argument will lead to an ending which most people can understand. To talk of understanding may be to talk of sense. In the common parlance, nonsense cannot be understood. It may be appreciated by a select few, but it is not understood by the person in the street, no matter where the street may be. Understanding is not there among the people that walk, talk, or exist in the street. I have been in many streets. I have not been impressed by my having been in many streets, but I have been there nonetheless. Perhaps I was recognized because nobody talked to me of sense or nonsense. My being there may have brought to light the issue of sense and meaning. People were loath to speak to me or to anybody else while I was in the street. I do not say that they loathed me, but they said nothing. I remember walking in a shopping mall in Columbus, Ohio. There was a dress shop with 2 mannequins in the window. One mannequin was wearing a red dress and a black hat, and the other was wearing a blue dress but no hat. Next door was a boot repair shop, and directly across the street was a shop with no name but with a grand piano in the window. Nobody seemed to understand the significance of such an arrangement. I looked at people, but their faces were blank. I said nothing, and they said nothing. The situation was amazing. Nobody from Kansas City could have understood it. I knew, and I understood that I knew. Others may know that they know, or think that they know that they know. This does not always indicate understanding. The bell tinkles, and its tinkling is taken to be tinkling. Tinkling is not usually connected with sense. One talks with meaning or tinkles. Tinkles, tinkling is a sound. That is a sound in its own right. This does not mean that tinkling is sense or nonsense or sense. To see the difference takes time, but may only lead to comparisons. To be continued in part 2.